How old is Earth really? Well, you could say 4.5 billion years and be a huge dork about it and click off, but how much time is that actually? The reality of the sheer amount of time that has passed since the planet's formation, or even just the initial rise of life here, is absolutely staggering. Our brains are literally incapable of processing how much of that time has actually passed prior to the dawn of humanity. Like, you can, I guess, logically understand the years, but I guarantee you, it is impossible for you to actually conceptualize how much time before us has passed and how much time after us will pass as well. And as a result of that, we have to ask, could anything have come before Homo sapiens? The reality of that situation, at least on this rock, is life is not uncommon at all. We know for a fact that it has been almost wiped out several times and then risen back up several times more, to which then we have to ask the further questions. Why is humanity so different? How is it possible that we arose so rapidly from seemingly nowhere and yet nothing else has done it before? And if we would like to continue our domination into space, we might actually have to do it with decidedly more, robust bodies and the frail meat suits that we have to contend with currently. In the events of first contact, it's sort of like when your older sibling comes back from college and then punches you in the face. Not my siblings. They would get absolutely rocked by a left hook, but maybe yours. Sucks to be you for sure. Anyhow, as the countdown is set, humanity is rapidly approaching the Great Filter. But what exactly is enforcing this upon us? Well, let's discuss that as well as where these things came from, how transferring consciousness may work, and what the Great Filter even is, considering it could already be behind us, fingers crossed, in the movie First Contact. We kick off our story with Uncorked. My God, it's back. May as well sponsor the channel at this point. Goated production company, by the way. A man then asks a poignant question. Are we alone? Me? Personally, as I sit here right now, the answer is yes. Give me 6 months to get back in fighting shape. Actually, that's a lie. Give me like 2 months. And I am so back after that. As a man walks along an area of Delphi, New York, he talks about if we are really alone. Our universe has been around much longer than humans, clearly. And he says he apparently needs to be careful or he could just turn into dark matter or dust. I think the reality is we are probably not alone, given just the absolute vast distances between everything, though we are probably alone in our immediate area. It's like, yeah, if you're lost in the woods in Canada somewhere, technically speaking, you're not alone on the planet, but is that really going to be helpful at that particular point in time? You could get eaten by a bear and nobody would ever really know. Also, because I plan on going hiking a lot alone in the Pacific Northwest this upcoming October, hopefully that statement is not going to be something that's quoted in some like YouTubers who go missing video. I will absolutely be strapped because I don't want to be clapped, and I'll have bear mace, so if that doesn't work, well then it was probably a Wendigo that got me. So as the power goes out, he hears a noise outside as he heads out with the most underpowered flashlight I've ever seen. A 3 lumen model, if I remember correctly. Looking out into the tall grass, you never want to do that at night, as someone clearly is watching him. Almond's activated for sure. I don't know, like, it's when things look at me through tall grass, it's gotta be like a primal mirror neuron response. Which actually, if you're wondering why I'm saying that, I know, I still cover science in the summaries. The point is, mirror neurons, they're basically mirror neurons. They're neurons within your brain that are looking for specific patterns. So like eyes in the tall grass would be a specific thing. That's what kind of makes you feel uneasy when you think you're being watched by something. It's because your eyes actually have picked up something watching you or some sort of pattern that looks similar to it, and your mirror neurons are scanning for these little tiny patterns to see if there needs to be a sort of response, I guess. So it makes you feel uneasy even though consciously you didn't see it. It's also allegedly where human telepathy is evolving somewhat. It's not 100% certain that this is the case, but basically areas of, like when you're trying to read somebody's mind, say like the card test they did. You remember Ghostbusters, when they did the card test where you had to read the other person's mind? That's actually a real test. And they found that those that could do it, they had activation in the mirror neuron areas of their brain, whereas those who were just guessing had activation within the prefrontal cortex of the brain. So, very interesting. We'll see how that kind of goes. I mean, there's really, I don't know, it's once again, I said this in my Roanoke Tales video, it seems like whenever we do science fiction, it's because we already have an idea of what we want in the future, or we're possibly already noticing something. But regardless, a storm then immediately rolls in out of nowhere as he heads back into his barn, hearing a weird noise outside. Turning around, something is making money moves in the barn as he tries to slowly connect 2 wires for some reason, which then fires something up in a blue light. All of life hinged on these 2 wires being connected. Seemed like there should have been a bit more redundancy there, right? Anyways, jumping over to a bunch of people saying they are seeing aliens, this is actually apropos given that we actually have a giant chunk of rock heading towards us that should be arriving in November. The cringe on Facebook is otherworldly. Moms keep sharing like crap from like naturalnews.com. Probably don't go to that. I'm sure it's totally a scam site where they just steal your IP address. But apparently they're saying they spotted lights on it, and for your edification, they didn't. Stop believing everything you see on Facebook, please, for the love of God. It's no surprise that we're finding these things because we just launched the James Webb Telescope, and now we have a bunch more clarity on these interstellar rocks that have been passing through our solar system, probably since forever. New technology makes us aware of new horrors. Wait until we discover the warp. So as people argue about what's going on, I don't know, man. I think I've just reached a point in my life. God, I'm getting sidetracked today. The ADHD is bad, but I've just reached a point in my life where aliens, if they show up and blow up the Earth, is there really anything I can personally do about it? Probably not. So I can't worry about it anymore. We've reached tortured Roanoke levels that shouldn't be possible. As a woman gets out of her car at the same barn the old man was at, she then heads inside the house. Clearly, she's a family member. Her brother is already there watching the news about the aliens, as one guy says, to defend the planet. Our way of life, galaxy-wide, paved with the skulls of those who died. The origins of Super Earth are starting to form, and as I always say, humanity number one. Not waking him up, by the way. She's been there for over an hour, and she didn't even say hey. Very interesting. Hugging like an awkward prom couple. They were siblings, but that's the first thing I could think of. Danny Boy and his woman split a while back. His son is with her, and she has lost her job. The last time they talked to their old man, it was over a year ago, and as they discuss being the closest family ever, the house then creaks as they are like, maybe we should sell the place. There was no trace of the old man ever found. Now, he's probably eaten. He's likely in alien guts as they talk, phrasing. This is not a tally situation when you see this thing. Looking through his stuff, though, Casey finds a book of 100 science words. Having a mental breakdown, as a treat, the whole house begins shaking. In another area, a couple begins heading home, totally smashed. You probably shouldn't be driving there, brother. Evidently, though, they just got engaged as they start making out while driving and being drunk. Very good. Slamming on the brakes, a light appears before them. Getting out of the car, he goes and looks, historically also not great. He immediately gets taken down as he stands back up and then gets into the car. Remember, this is how those wretched abominations, known as an anglerfish, actually hunts. They get you by the light. Call in a 500 kg bomb on my location. And the only reason I have to call it that is because the Super Earth apparently switched over to metric. Not my Super Earth! That night, Danny McBride talks to his friend on the phone. He's a real one, though, as he hypes up his boy. Casey makes the scene, as in they just kind of have their vibe ruined, I guess. He gets headaches and forgets things after an accident on base, where his apparently brains got scrambled. What was the accident? Wouldn't you like to know, Weather Boy? They never tell us. He would call Casey, apparently, and she would never answer, which is, classic sisters, am I right? Danny then says, this is an actual stable living situation, and he could use a house. Couldn't we all? Casey then also lost her job, and she has no money, so she's a broke girl, which means this guy's offspring, Ian Braddock, the dude from, the beginning, really got hit. His offspring sucks. So, going for a nice jaunt the next day, he smolders while looking at the grass, moving the wind. How is it doing it, I wonder? And I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea what this was even about here. Maybe he heard something? I don't know. So as they drink coffee and they discuss looking for their old man, Danny says their dad is exactly where he's supposed to be, likely dead. Leaving to go run some errands, Prometheus from the night before now wakes up with his own brains clearly scrambled. His fiancée comes in telling him what happened last night as he has no memory of any of it. Been there. Sitting back up, his woman then goes and takes a shower as he says he's gonna go hang out with Jason as he can straight up hear something clicking in his ear. Bro's getting absolutely lost in the sauce over there as he sits back up and then enters the bathroom. The building begins shaking as his eyes go full on Sharingan. I guess that's how you pronounce it from Naruto. I'm not a weeb, I just watched too many memes. This one guy had very clearly pink eye. And it was just making a whole bunch of memes about it. Anyways, exiting the shower scene, she comes out to him and he answers her, but it's super duper quiet for some reason. He says he dropped something, which was the earthquake. Okay, Swolger status. Saying he doesn't remember everything from last night, he then lays back down and he gets back up to go get the card from the bar. Back over at the super sibling bonding house, Casey then looks through her dad's math on dark matter. Finding a glowing trash can, she uncovers a timer, and as for Sledge, it's a bomb! The references flow like water. Trying to hack into the mainframe after 2 attempts to get in, which the fate of humanity was dependent upon a password that could be guessed within 2 tries. Apparently out at the bar, everyone is talking about aliens all of a sudden, like all news channels, and it's never really said as to why. This just exists for some reason. Bartender's pretty base though. He says if we're too busy looking up, they'll steal our rights down below. So, Pretty much. Listen, love your country, question your government. Distraction is the #1 issue. Alien Possession Man comes in next and says he needs some hair of the dog as he starts laughing. Feeling at Mr. Krabs once more, Danny then asks if he's okay. He starts asking where Bradich is as Danny asks if they know a guy named Ian Bradich. Apparently, that was his dad. Hitting the devil's lettuce to chill out later, he's watching news about aliens. Again, terrible plan. That just seems like a great way to straight up get paranoid. Also, there's a hole in the ceiling, which I think I know what this is kind of referencing, so I will explain it later. You just have to keep watching. Looking over, he then spots himself in the kitchen as then he jumps over to where he now is and sees himself sitting on the couch, asking where Bradich is. So now there's 2 of them, and then 3. They keep asking him where he is as they start moving. Bro, just start throwing bows, you know what I'm saying? Like Dean Winchester fighting the fairies in that one episode. They seemed surprised when I started opening fire. So returning back to the siblings' house, Danny then smokes, which is counterintuitive to all the running, as he enters the barn and finds Casey and the trash can. Casey says that she basically found something and it has everything to do with UFOs, or it could just be a trash can. Further analysis is needed. Meanwhile, Jason is heading over to Alien Possession Man's house to hang out with him like a good friend. Finding him on the couch, his face is looking rough. Touching him, he begins talking to him as he starts asking and saying how humanity doesn't see everything around them, and it's the beginning of the end. He now starts asking where a human named Bradich is, and because he doesn't know, I'm guessing the alien possession really doesn't have any amount of emotional regulation, so he just straight up explodes Jason's head. Good lord. Arguably, this species are just a bunch of jagoffs, mainly because they appear to be enforcers for one reason or another, and the question is, why? Well, I'll complain about all of that in the science section. Do not worry your pretty striped head about it. So Danny drinks alone, smokes cigarettes, and then goes and runs in the morning. Definitely military. Calling Chloe, she doesn't answer. Definitely military. Meanwhile, Casey continues watching a video about her old man and gravitational anomalies. Nerds. He discussed Bradich's law of dark matter, apparently. Tentatively, of course. Hearing a humming noise, there is a beam of light in the distance as they both head out and go check out what that is, because that's concerning. And looking at the beam, yep, it's a beam, all right. As he stares, his own brains start getting absolutely scrambled, as now they both are getting scrambled. But the light was blue. What does that mean? Waking up the next day on the couch, at this big age, your back is going to start hurting at a certain point. They discuss how he's feeling, as Danny then tells Casey to stop talking about their dad's work, which you have to ask, why? Now, it could be Danny and Casey's tentative law of dark matter. However, Danny is now uninvited to the pizza party, so it's just Casey's tentative law of dark matter. So back over at the alien possession house, looks like Prometheus's meat suit is getting burnt through at this point. Danny calls Chloe once more. Yeah, bro. I mean, I don't know. You gotta pull back on that. Of course, she does have your son, so I don't know, maybe involve the cops or something. You're allowed to see your son. So looking at the railing on the porch, there's a carving on it. A circle with a bunch of lines. Alien Possession Man's fiance then comes back as he keeps asking her if she knows Bradich or not. Head explosion time. She tells him, well, he might be dead. Bradich, that is. He says it's crucial they find this man, as then she kisses him, which, no shot, he could have some weird infection or something. It's called standard precaution. The assumption is everybody is infected with everything until proven different. And yes, it is an absolute nightmare working in a lab, adopting that mindset, and then trying to date again. Truly terrifying times, because everybody has everything. Also, bro is complaining about how hot the planet is. Yeah, let me help you pack your bags then so you can get off my world, you giant nerd. Sleeping with all the lights on, Danny then wakes up hearing a noise, or it was the 12 lamps illuminating the room. Bradich is calling out to Danny Boy here, and checking the building, he finds a knife on Casey's bed as he hears himself also behind the door. Having an extreme out-of-body experience, I've actually had this before, then seeing himself downstairs, he heads over there as he's seeing sideways through time. Getting woken up by Casey, she says he was sleepwalking. Also, you can absolutely wake somebody up who's sleepwalking. They say it will freak people out, but that's not really all that true. Yeah, you could have someone overreact, but the damage they could do by sleepwalking is actually way worse. I've sleptwalked before. It's pretty crazy, actually. And I didn't even try to fight the trash cans I woke up by. It's not that big of a deal. So seeing the carving, he says he felt the presence, as in his father's presence, and he's there just in another time point, I guess. Which, actually, that was kind of an assumption. That was just my guess. I think it might be something else. It's not even really time travel. It just appears to be consciousness transfer. So finding a thumb drive, they say stop, because their dad was hiding it for a reason. You found the furry file. Sometimes it's just best to not go through your loved one's things if you don't want your view of them to be horrifically altered. Their old man talks about how his sense of time is becoming chaotic at best. He claims there is something evil there. In the background, there can actually be seen some eyes, and we will call him Four Eyes and dunk on him later. Meanwhile, Booze and Cigarette Man is on his run, as Casey calls him, saying she's going to go out for a bit and we'll be back later, as she tells him to be careful. Continuing his run, Danny finds something. Dr. Lyman now makes a scene to meet up with Casey, as they have a lot to discuss apparently, which is actually a lie, because their entire conversation, I kid you not, is maybe about 15 sentences long. So the Jehovah's also finally make the scene, running into Alien Possession Man, as the alien scum talks about not being a fan of the sun. Okay, then leave. It's that easy, big dog. I don't believe this thing is even from this planet. Get out of here. So Dr. Lyman, meanwhile, talks about how they were digging and actually found life from over 2 billion years ago, which, as we know, we assumed life began around 1.3 billion years ago. And this would mean that likely around this time, Venus was somewhat habitable and Mars still had water. They discuss the Great Filter as the Xeno scum talks about how the end is near. And you might be wondering, Roanoke, what the hell are you talking about with Venus and Mars? This is obviously, we need to go there and do some more in-depth research, I guess is the best way to put it. But judging by the atmosphere of Venus, there is enough water in its atmosphere that actually it could have been a shallow ocean over the whole thing, or areas with deeper oceans. But we also know it's been repaving itself through volcanism. Like at one point, the volcanism just got way too out of control, and the greenhouse gases of carbon dioxide and pretty much everything else created a problem. But the biggest thing is that it's very, very, very likely that there was water at some point on Venus. It would have just been more of a tropical planet. And Mars actually had a thicker atmosphere because at one point it had a magnetosphere, because we actually believe now that the core may be similar to Earth's, and it created maybe not as strong as a magnetic field as Earth does, but at least strong enough. And then eventually it kind of screwed itself, and then that magnetic field failed, or it was in the middle of flipping, and then the atmosphere just got ripped away. So the point is that very likely we had 2 habitable planets at one point in time next to Earth, which if we still had that, imagine, if you will for a moment, how much better our space race would have been. Instead, everything around us it's just all dead space. Friggin' lame, we gotta terraform these things. Anyway, so Dr. Lyman discusses how humans have accomplished a lot in such a small amount of time, and the Great Filter sucks. As Alien Possession Man approaches the Jehovah, brother, it is a demon. You gotta tuck and roll out of this situation. But instead, he gets stabbed. Basically, Lyman's stance is that humans have never been contacted because of the Great Filter. Back at the house, they discuss the symbols as Danny says Ian is gone. He's got a chip on his shoulder about the whole situation. His old man barely knew him, apparently, and he doesn't want to make the same mistake with his son. Admirable. Also, his soul ejects out of his body that night. I don't know. Why? Well, I kind of know why. Anyways, later his fiance then heads back home with some random dude in tow. Not anybody, but, Alien Possession Man. Evidently, the countdown has been set to when something is supposed to show up and cause something else to happen. They've been rather vague so far about what is even supposed to be happening here. Hearing a noise, Casey now equally gets lost in the sauce as Danny wakes up and sees her in her room. Fiance now gets called to the basement as he says, "My skin hurts. It feels nice in the basement." I mean, I guess. I am not going down there. That is a 40-year-old neat. Goodbye. So Danny now approaches Casey as she talks about Bradich. Danny is told time is running out, and soon it will be here. And he's like, what? The end. Danny asks if he's an alien, which here we go. They were apparently entities that evolved past their physical forms and then stored themselves out in space as dark matter. Which, okay. I mean, my brain thinks, why not just store yourself as a computer file or something and give yourself a physical body that's not affected by cosmic radiation? But you know what? That's just my human brain. Meanwhile, Alien Possession Man is beginning to mutate. Fiance's friend now shows up locked and loaded, Brides of Christ, but the reality is if you're gonna point that at someone, you gotta be willing to actually pull the trigger on it. Otherwise, it's escalated well past the point of talking, and if you can't pull the trigger, well, you're totally boned. Bro gets chokeholded by what this thing calls himself, which is the end, as in it's the end of your stay, get off my planet. So Fiance then gets stabbed by the Alien Possession Man, which makes him rather sad, but the alien is still in control. Shrieking because of it, she's down for the count as Casey then eats her fingers. Asking her if she remembers anything, apparently she doesn't, from her own possession. However, she does need to show him something. Casey thinks their dad opened a portal to an extra-dimensional being. The creatures take over living things. In one of the diaries, the dad said Debbie went missing, and then Danny actually found Debbie on his run, which was the dog. Showing Danny the trash can, tomorrow is evidently the Great Filter from these extra-dimensional beings. Is this Half-Life? Having the Great Filter enforced upon you by another race is also complete F tier for that race. Like, oh, cool, you found us. Guess we have to go extinct now. Like, bro, there are so many resources out there. Get out of here. My thinking is, why don't you come down here and hand fight us, you freaking nerds? So the aliens are being talked about once again as they can see an alien as it attacks the dude that straight up approaches them on the news. Okay, so I get like walking to that thing. No, actually, no, I don't. I would never approach something like that in my life. Maybe throw a rock at it like an actual Chad, but not approach it. So Casey now spills the spaghetti out of her pocket about how 3 years ago they started seeing UFOs. She ended up losing her job because the planet started focusing on weapons development. Our way of life, galaxy-wide. Danny then says he got to hear their dad, and he reports back that it did in fact kill him. Their dad is in fact gone, but his echo is still there, or he's apparently dark matter. They're a little unclear on that one, actually, which is great, as it actually leaves room for interpretation, which is the whole channel's purpose, and that's what I'm predicating all this on. Saying, screw it, where do they start to prevent their extinction? Evidently, they need to upload some sort of virus to prevent this from happening. Bit of a strange connection here, so it's like a dark matter computer up in space? They never really tell you, so Danny's Prometheus over here says he will actually come help them, as then he hands in, like, they built up this whole thing like he was coming to help, right? Dude never shows up at all. I was so confused. I was like, I thought he was supposed to like come do something, but I guess they kind of forgot about him. Anyways, so Danny heads in while Casey holds 2 wires from earlier and then finally touches them, but before she can, another storm begins rolling in. Calling Chloe one last time, she doesn't answer. Well, surprise, surprise, he says he wants them both to be happy and excited. Tomorrow may be different. Yeah, that would probably be a cry for help in voicemail form. Meanwhile, outside, old Red Eyes is back in the tall grass. Running away because Danny isn't out there, the power then goes off as Casey heads back inside. Hearing a noise, the door now opens as the thing is inside the house. And it has figured out doors. So it is smarter than the aliens from Signs. I guess that's not a good sign.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
As it enters, God, it's got 4 eyes, but they're not even truly binocular. God, what an F-tier build. No wonder these guys didn't want their bodies anymore, unless this is a biomechanical build, and then they chose to look this way? You guys suck. Anyway, searching for her because of its lack of horizontal vision, it can't find her because it sucks and it has literal 4 eyes. Get good, alien. Danny is now armed with man's answer to the alien menace 100,000 years ago, a knife. Pretty based. Then they answer it with man's other answer, straight up fire. Hell yeah, brother. Heading outside is daytime now. How long was that fight? Like, good lord. They have also 7 minutes until the end of the world. Grabbing man's other answer, a blunt instrument, this thing is learning of humans today. It was man who was made in God's image, not you, creature. It says, man knows nothing, as he asks, well, what do you want? It is there to ensure the natural order, their extinction. Why is that a natural order? Why were the Reapers huge punks in Mass Effect? Who knows? So he says, it will hurt. Well, yeah, so will blunt force trauma to your weird-looking head. He says he's the messenger as they upload the virus, but Danny then gets stabbed by the alien. He tells him he's alone and nobody is coming to help. Like, this thing is talking the most amount of smack ever. Galaxy-wide! Casey gets straight up smacked in the head as, oh hell yeah, man's other answer, a literal spear. Stabbing the thing, the alien then dies because it sucks. And then they look at the trash can. This movie is giving me violent levels of like humanism right now. So a beam now appears in the sky as Casey says they need to fix the machine. They hug it out as siblings, but they don't have time for any of this. Eruptions appear around the world at this point as they have 1 minute to prevent this from happening. Whatever this is. Casey then says they need to detonate the trash can manually. Doing it, the red beam then turns blue because that means something, and as it does, she's enveloped in the beam, and I'm pretty sure she gets straight up vaporized as Danny Boy runs to the barn and hides from Project Bluebeam over here. With the light at the end of the tunnel, Casey now meets her dad again. Meanwhile, like me in Vegas come November, Danny wakes up bleeding, looking rough, and not in the usual place that he should be. Oh look, Chloe finally decides to call him, as then he ignores it. My, how the tables have turned. So as the news talks about how they are not alone, the aliens have now arrived, and it is officially first contact, which means, thus concludes, first contact. Welcome to the science portion. The first thing we need to talk about is why aliens can completely suck it. The second thing we need to discuss is human consciousness as a whole and the idea that our meat suits, continuing on in an evolutionary sense, might not be like the best way to go out amongst the stars. I will say this is going to get a little metaphysical given it deals with concepts that we really don't know the origins of or how true they may or may not be. Like that doublespeak? Needlessly complicated and vague. I love it. And with that, This is more of a speculative topic than like I usually do, much like when I occasionally cover purely supernatural things. Given the information is exceedingly limited on this topic, we will be connecting dots that you may or may not agree with, so just, I don't know, enjoy the ride. So let's start from the beginning concerning these concepts, because there are quite a few that are like, okay then. And I have to be real, this whole discussion will be much more like my Event Horizon episode. It's like at a certain point the concepts being discussed have less to do with the established science and more to do with me pointing to a board in a mailroom connecting why nobody actually works in this building. So kicking it off, what is the Great Filter? I actually discussed this in my video that kicked off this entire channel, the Brethren Moon episode, but essentially this idea is reliant on the Fermi paradox or the dark force theory. The Fermi paradox raises the question, where is everyone? Why has, for all intents and purposes, as a lowly regular citizen, because Super Earth hasn't formed yet, have aliens not really come down and made themselves known? We would like to think the government has everything under control, and we typically, will think that they know more than they do, because actually it gives the average person a sense of peace, knowing that something is bigger than yourself, and also that thing knows what's going on out there. What is it? No God, no fear, no God, no fear, like it's something like that. Anyways, but at the end of the day, the government, they're really just nothing but a collection of humans, just as uninformed and unknowing as the rest of us. Sorry to rip that band-aid off. The reality is, all an alien race would need to do is take this planet in the first place is just develop a virus that attacks the tight junctions of cells, and we would dissolve into a gooey mass of nothingness, which brings us to basically the dark force theory. Dark force theory says the reason nobody talks to anybody is because that thing might take you out. And by the time you talk to it, it may be even more advanced than you are right now, and it just creates a whole problem. But what is coupled with the Fermi paradox in particular is something known as the Great Filter. The Great Filter comes in many flavors depending on where humanity is at this current point in time. It could be great, and it could be devastating. It may be that the filter is actually before the current point in time, and may be as simple as life really never evolves past just basic animals. Really strange events and occurrences must take place for the human brain to develop on its own. It may also be that maybe life really never evolves past maybe the microbe stage, and other worlds with life are really just all single-celled. And this is the best case scenario for humanity, as this means we've already made it. GG easy. The other possibility is that it lies before us. It may be that other species have actually reached this tech point that we have, built a Hadron Collider, and then accidentally black holed their entire planet. Alternatively, they may have descended into nuclear war and annihilated their planet as well. Or it could be that they just sort of branch out into the surrounding solar system and deplete it rapidly before they can even escape in the first place. And it may just be because possibly FTL travel is really not possible no matter what you do, and there is no way around it. Which sort of brings up this idea today, but we'll kind of get there. If these are before us, then humanity will have to contend with quite a task. What's more likely is that there are actually multiple great filters, predictable patterns of behavior that a species will exhibit at one point or another, one that filters will typically get them. Personally, if we have been visited by aliens, it seems like maybe like the 50s were the highest level of alien sightings. I don't find it odd that we had just figured out splitting the atom and then these alleged sightings began. Let's say you come across like an uncontacted tribe, right? Well, they may be building fires and hanging out, and it's like, oh cool, look at that. But then one day you spot one of them in a building actually creating a steam engine from scratch. I think at that point you'd probably take a more keen interest on what they're doing, and may even make contact at that point to be like, hey, by the way, I know you're building the steam engine, but we kind of already have all this over here. Anyways, with us, however, it was probably kind of to tell us that nukes are great, but don't nuke yourselves into oblivion. So, great filter, not so great depending on where we lie in the process of it. But then, the question will become further past this point, what even are we to a great filter in the first place? See, this is the part where it starts getting a little out there, and it's based on the neurology of our own anxiety skull meat. We are not even really sure how things work. Yes, we can do brain scans to determine where we are thinking currently and how the process looks on a physical level. Patterns emerge, and then we can interpret those to mean certain events will unfold, and as a result, this is pretty important. But if we take it down to the most basic component, we are essentially salts moving across a gradient causing an electrical discharge, which this is the science portion after all. So, it'll probably help to explain why all of this is fairly odd in the first place, given this is just a chemical reaction. Essentially, as you know, a neuron receives stimulus from another neuron through the dendritic connections. From here, voltage-gated sodium channels will open up, which causes sodium ions to flow into the open channels. Reaching a certain point, the membrane potential will depolarize as the inside of the neuron is more positive. A threshold is then reached, and an action potential is generated. Peak depolarization is then reached from there, and the sodium channels are closed. From here, potassium channels are opened, allowing potassium to flow out, which then restores the negative charge inside of the neuron, which in turn repolarizes the neuron. By you listening to that and understanding it, I have effectively forced your channels open millions of times over. Phrasing. And this is how your neurons work, and this is how we think and exist. But what's always fascinated me about the process is, where does new information actually come from? Animals will typically react to their environment, which is how their survival is based. Apart from that, abstract thinking is not so much a necessary process. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but when you take a look at us, it's like all we do is abstractly think. In fact, your brain is your worst enemy. New ideas come up all the time, though, completely independent of the environment. So then there is no stimulus technically that would really be pushing for this thought to be created. Take this video, for instance. For those that are still here, how do I even know I'm saying any of this right now? What caused me to write this down and then say it? What neuron is the first in the chain of neurons to kickstart this process, and how does it know in the first place what I am trying to even convey? That is what is fascinating about the human brain. It appears to not just run on a stimulus-reaction pipeline. Instead, due to our ability to think abstractly, it seems like there is another process going on which we are wholly unaware of. And trust me, this relates back to the Great Filter. I just like doing these more thought experiment videos from time to time. So I believe what this movie may be postulating is that the afterlife and consciousness are already intrinsically connected through the idea of dark energy and dark matter. What are those? Well, dark energy, as we call it, is almost a complete unknown form of energy that appears to be accelerating the expansion of the universe. And this is thought to be fueled possibly by the presence of dark matter as well. So think of it like this. Realistically, the universe itself did not have dark matter or dark energy. The gravity that exists within the universe itself would be drawing everything back in. Prior to this idea, it was assumed the universe was actually going to end in something called the Big Crunch, which, everything was expanding from the singularity explosion at the beginning. The expansion would slow down and then be drawn back inward by its own gravity, which would probably result in another singularity to form later on. However, what has been noted is it keeps expanding, and it's actually accelerating, which now means it'll probably go the way of the Big Freeze, as atomically everything is drawn apart further and further, and basically, then protons are drawn apart and then quarks are drawn. Basically, everything's going to be drawn apart. So, it really doesn't matter. At a certain point, all life here is probably screwed. But again, this is just a physical issue, maybe not so much an energetic one. With this concept of dark matter and dark energy, the thing to remember is it's not evil, it's just not understood. It's also not antimatter. Antimatter and matter combined release pure energy, which you don't want to be near that. Way stronger than splitting an atom. It's essentially, if I remember correctly, it's like protons and electrons are spinning the opposite ways of each other. But anyhow, it's not like, when it comes to dark energy, it's not really understood all that well. So we have to ask ourselves, okay, then what properties does it really have? Well, from what we are assuming, the state of matter we exist as actually doesn't even seem to be the predominant form of matter in the universe. We appear as an anomaly. Dark matter appears to be 27% of the universe's total mass, while normal matter, as it's called, and it's only called that because that's what we are, is only around 5%, and 68% of the universe's total mass is technically just the force of dark energy. So, you were probably gathering at this point what this means, and if you aren't, well, don't worry, there is a connection coming. Also, if you're like, well, dark energy isn't matter, how's that work? Kind of think of photons, which behave like a particle and a wavelength. Photons technically should have mass because they're a particle, but they're also energy, so they behave like a wave. And I know what's going to happen. Somebody's going to be like, well, actually, photons do not have mass, but the reality is it's so close to zero that it's effectively considered zero, right? But it's still not zero. Take absolute zero in terms of, freezing, right? That's where all motion of particles just completely stop, and it is absolute zero. There's no energy in the system. Well, you can get close to absolute zero, but you can not really hit absolute zero. There's always still a little bit of energy in the system, although we have considered it a couple of times, essentially been like, oh, it's basically absolute zero. So the point is that mathematically they should be a massless particle, but they're not technically massless. They just have so little mass that it almost doesn't matter. But then you have to kind of wonder to yourself, okay, well, if we go into quantum physics at this point and you get down to the smaller and smaller particles, eventually the photon's going to be huge. So difficult. Basically, you start getting, near the God particle, like the particle that makes up all other particles, and then we're going to probably figure out one day there's more particles that make up the God particle. So regardless, there is a tiny, 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 infinitely small amount of mass to a photon. So let's jump back over to the aliens real quick. First off, it doesn't appear that they are in fact aliens. It appears as though they are the original inhabitants of Earth. Technically speaking, the reality of things is we cannot actually go that far back to find out what's been going on with Earth. While the oldest crust on Earth is in Western Australia, dated back to 4.4 billion years ago, the average age of the crust on Earth is around 64 million years, basically due to like subduction zones and resurfacing and all these events. That's what makes these things so difficult for us to fully understand. Earth is old. In terms of human years, you can kind of think of her like a 46-year-old. What was Earth doing in her 20s? You don't want to know, so don't ask questions. But the point is, any society could have risen, thrived, and gone extinct, and we would have no clue about it. I actually had a dream the other night about dinosaurs developing technology, and they got wiped out before they had a chance to use it, so that was a weird dream. But the point is, there is every possibility, given the vast amount of time that life has been present on Earth, that if the conditions rose for humanity to rise, then other species could have done the same thing inside of a relatively small amount of time. Now, there is some discrepancy. Some people are saying, or some scientists saying that humans are around 300,000 years old. Some are still kind of holding to the 100,000 years. That's not a lot of time. In such a, like, imagine what we've done in the last 300 years alone, right? Like, exponential. So if you really think about things like our buildings, roads, or any other stuff that maybe would show that we were here, you're kind of wrong. Our plastics and nuclear waste would probably show that we were here, but now there's actually bacteria that eats plastics and a fungus that eats radiation. So two things we were so sure we're going to prove that we existed on this planet could just become a food source, eaten away over millions of years to absolutely nothing. Who's to say oil reserves that we enjoy currently weren't some previous species' waste product for another energy source that they used that was then converted by bacteria? It's purely a thought experiment on that front, though. Who knows? Anyhow, so as we look at this species, it seems like there are two of them in conflict with one another. However, they have the same abilities: possession of the human body and a physical form, or at least some of them do. Why they are at odds with one another is never really truly explained. The one that appears to be helping Danny McBride and Casey appears to be a benefactor, warning them, and the other one, Four Eyes, is the harbinger of the Great Filter. Of course, the issue is one that warns is aware of the Great Filter, and the Harbinger of Doom is also aware of the Great Filter, so then, well, are they the same species? I believe so. But what this appears to me is that this species has ensured the cleansing of Earth continually through the eons. They were the first to arise on the world and advance to a tech point where they left their physical bodies behind and became dark energy, which is rather interesting to think about. The Great Filter is designed to stop physical forms from progressing. Maybe the Great Filter is looked at incorrectly in the grand scheme of things, at least concerning this interaction. Now, this is just me guessing at an ancient species' intentions, obviously, but here we have a species that has transcended their own form, achieved immortality by transferring their consciousness into dark matter and dark energy, looking at humanity doing the same thing, almost rising up the tech ladder. They know we will eventually achieve the same process, but a lot will die along the way. You know what it kind of looks like to me? To be completely honest with you, it's like an understanding of death and rapture. The first species, likely struggling with their own mortality, would have achieved, or like at least eventually grasped the concept that, humans who follow religions think now. The consciousness continues on without the body after death in some degree, which then links back to my consciousness discussion from earlier. Are we in the driver's seat, or are we just conduits? Again, all hypothetical, and someone on Reddit is going to be really bent out of shape that I'm discussing hypotheticals here, but this connects to how does the first neuron actually know to fire in a way that you wouldn't think prior to the thought even being created? Where does the idea of the soul come from? What about seeing ghosts or having out-of-body experiences? I know, not scientific, but let's just go back to the CIA files of astral projections into Soviet bases that apparently turned out to be correct. Of course, it's the CIA, so make of that what you will, but the point is, there are many things humanity believes, and I think connections in our brains that we do not fully understand. This movie seems to suggest that the soul is essentially a piece of consciousness, likely stemming from dark matter or dark energy itself. This species that ditched their physical form formed dark energy actively and join it, and now, whenever another species possessing true consciousness arises, a certain amount of time passes where that species is eventually assimilated into the dark energy and dark matter realm, which arguably, is the more normal state of the universe, given how percentages have already been mentioned from earlier. Now, what exactly does this mean? Well, it's mostly for fun around here, but this species that imposes the Great Filter, and likely has done so prior, is really, I think, kind of just trying to help a species to its ultimate conclusion, it seems like. Of course, Four Eyes is a sadistic doucher about it, but, he kind of takes glee, and then, again, he's I don't know, maybe that's just his MO in the first place. And I think the most clear-cut example of this consciousness transfer is when we see Boy Toy get taken over and start wrecking faces. You can kind of think of it as like a consciousness superimposed over his consciousness. Humanity at some point after death will on an individual level have their consciousness or their soul continue on as dark energy, but in their current form, much like how they are susceptible to the Great Filter, they are also susceptible to dark energy burning through their roof apparently, and then into their brains. Is this truly how consciousness is working as displayed? And if that's the case, then it seems to me that once this dark energy has entered the brain, the person will now have to contend with this dark energy force firing their brain towards certain actions, even though they are actively still aware. It's almost like two sets of neurons running at the same time. So it's consider it to be like this, like a ruminating thought that won't go away, except it can also reside within your primary motor cortex and cerebellum, which brings us around to the Harbinger. First, given this possession of human meat suits, it really seems like to me that this is a biomechanical body of sorts, not really fully living, but not really fully machine either. However, it can be damaged clearly as it takes a pitchfork to the guts, which then drops him. Now, I'm assuming, here's the thing, here's what's weird about this whole thing. It's, while the guy was changing who got possessed the fiance, it was never really indicated that this was him at any point. It could be him, but those four eyes have already existed in the background when Ian was attacked. So none of this stuff really makes any sense. Anyway, so whereas dark energy variants are sort of like the rest of the population, I believe, they are benevolent for some reason, and they still impose the Great Filter on humanity, but they want to free us from our physical forms, negating sickness, pain, and death to become pure consciousness up in the sky. I mean, possibly that makes sense. I mean, that's pretty much what all raptures are, like the one that was apparently supposed to happen on the 23rd. Brother, nobody knows when that's supposed to go down. People should probably just stop guessing is my guess, but I would say these aliens can catch hands. This is our rock, and if they want it, and our consciousness, then they should just come down here and fight like a man. Raise hell, praise Dale. But anyhow, I want to thank you guys for watching. Yeah, I know this one was a little bit weird and out there. There wasn't actually too much about the aliens to begin with, and it's just kind of like, all it was consciousness and a lot of plot holes. So I hope you enjoyed regardless. And if you did, please leave a like as it helps get the video out there. Anyhow, I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and channel links down in the description, like Roanoke Tales, which you should go watch. But speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the Astronaut tier, we have Husith. Thank you, my man, for your awesome support. Next up at the Astrophysicist tier, we have Death's Dancer. Thank you as well, bro. And at the Scientist tier, we have Frank Shaft Crank. I actually love electric cars, the Anglerfish, which as always is a lie, Invictus Echo, Metric System Official Texan, and Stutz. And to the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support as well. There's a long way towards helping out the channel, and I literally cannot run functionally without it. So you guys are absolute ballers. All right, that's going to do it for me. Everyone enjoy, and we'll see y'all in the next one.